work that you're doing is not with the children in your other business, it's with the parents. So
Yeah.
you're getting the parents to tap into their inner child so that they can be more relatable to their children.
The more you can relate to your kid, the more you can tell them, oh, mom understands this, or dad understands this, or I went through this when I was your age, or, give them some examples of, I hear you, I understand you, you're validated, you're safe. That's what the kid needs to hear. That's what kids need to hear now.
Hey, welcome to the Conscious Broadcast. I am Danielle Kane, and I am really excited to have another guest today, Erin. But before we get into that, I want to thank you for joining us. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the Conscious Broadcast channel. And I'd be more than willing to hear from you as well if you ever want to join for one of the episodes. Again, we're here to share stories. And today we're going to hear about Erin's story about how she started her business and how she came about to this whole mindfulness and inner child journey that she's on right now. So I'm going to give a brief introduction for Erin, and then Erin will get into it. Okay. She is an inner child coach for parents, and I can attest to that because I'm one of those parents of tweens and teens, and I actually have younger kids as well. And it's called the Peaceful Parents Reparenting Your Inner Child. She has a background in elementary and special education, yoga, mindfulness. And did you, I guess, have a bachelor's in psychology, child psychology?
My bachelor's is in elementary and special ed, but I did a
Okay.
lot of child psychology and development studies in that.
In that field.
Yes.
Perfect. And you currently also own a daycare.
hmm
So does that have a name?
Yeah. So it just got off the ground. So it is Mini Philly Explorers.
Mini Philly Explorers. Ooh, because you never know. I mean, through these conversations, somebody might be in Philly and be like,
Yeah,
hey, I would love to explore what this is like.
for sure.
So, well, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Yes, Erin and I met 2 years ago. I own a gym in Barrington, New Jersey, and we were actually neighbors too. And she reached out, one of the first people to reach out when we relocated. And I remember being like, I don't know about this person. I'm like, she's calling and maybe she's like a spy from the other gym down the way. No, but I was so excited when we first met. It was like I knew we were going to be good friends the minute that we connected. So I'm very excited to have been part of your journey and looking forward to hearing more about your story. So you went to school for basically special education, elementary education, wanted to be a
Mhm.
teacher. So let's talk about, that interest and how you got started with that.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, first of all, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with you per
Yeah.
usual. The conversations are great.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, it's been a pleasure to find you guys through the gym and what you do and just attract other people, like-minded people around me for that as well. So I'm
Hmm.
happy to be here.
Yay.
So I went to school for elementary and special ed. I always wanted to be a teacher. That was just always my go-to was just to work with kids. I've worked with kids forever. And it was really exciting for me to go to college and kind of fulfill what I thought was my mission in life was to work with kids forever and or be part of kids' lives forever in some way. And I really enjoyed being in the classroom, but I felt like, in my four walls, there wasn't much I could really experience outside of them. It was
Hmm.
very contained. And there were things that I had to do that um, I loved to be there for the kids, but it was just, very constricted with what I was able to do with them. And I kind of immediately fell in love with working with kids and talking to them about their emotions, their feelings, what they went through the day before or the week before, and kind of how to work through that. And when they brought it to school with them, we'd go over, why things are happening, or if there were like arguments in my classroom, we'd have family meetings and we'd all sit around and talk about what happened and why and how we can do better for next time. Or
Mm.
um, it was just such a structure in my class that I really loved, and um, I cared more about that than I did the academics. Although my kids did great and would always, grow in reading and math and things like that, I just know that my passion was more invested into how the child was acting and what they brought with them to school every day, emotion wise.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question for you because, I mean, I'm obviously here for a reason. And part of that reason is I've had a shift in like my consciousness of really of like what I want for myself and for my family. And so, with that being said, for you, was there a shift in your consciousness too about like the idea of schooling? Like, oh, I had this idea, and then really tapping into like, wait, this just doesn't really resonating with me because of how I see things. And what I mean by that is like when I see my kids going to school, I would love for them to be more focused on not only the academics, but socially what's going on. How are we feeling? Because if someone can't process their emotions in some way, how are they going to do the work anyway?
Mm,
So, I mean, and I don't know how much schools, I mean, mainstream schools tolerate that time to make sure everyone's settled. So, what did you experience with the environment and the expectations of, meeting the curriculum and then being able to actually teach the way that, that's innate to you?
right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I caught on pretty early to the fact that there was all of that, the confinement, and I felt so much pressure, and I didn't really understand why my first couple years. My first year, I loved, I was really honed in on like helping with the kids, getting to know them, kind of creating relationships with them where they would trust me and I would trust them. But my second year, I felt, more pressure and like more constriction, and I was like, why do I feel this way? I actually I begged my principal to let me loop to from first to second grade with my class because I really connected with them and like loved them very much. I wanted to continue on with them until they were eighth graders, but that was a little bit too much.
Too much
Uh,
of a stretch that you could just stay with your kids the whole
exactly,
time.
exactly, exactly. But anyway, so I felt more pressure my second and third year of teaching when I really was like, wait, like what are we doing here? I really wanted to again work with the kids and make them feel supported, make them feel acknowledged, accepted, all of these things, but there wasn't time for that. And I felt the pressure build up in me that when I started teaching lessons, I would get quickly irritated or irritable because I couldn't get out what I needed to, since there were so many things happening in the classroom. Like so many
Mhm.
emotions were brought into one room, and it was a reset every time my kids left their room or left my room. So it'd be them coming in the morning. They'd all bring their stuff with them from home, right? And we'd have to like slowly ease into the reading and writing morning. Um, and then they would leave for lunch and come back, and there'd be arguments on the playground or arguments in the lunchroom and things that again they were bringing back with them. So we'd have to reset. And then they'd go to special and come back from special, and we'd have to reset again. And it's like I loved those reset moments because that's what I love. That's what I care about. I want them all to be together and be happy and try to express themselves as the best to their ability. But there wasn't time for that. And then I would feel, the pressure of standing in front of the classroom and being like, okay, well, I have to teach them this math lesson right now. I have to teach them this reading lesson right now. Or we have to go into groups and start to bring, four kids back at a time while these other kids are maybe fighting in the corner or arguing in the corner. And I don't know necessarily what's going on. And so it's like, I feel like I just was wearing too many hats at once and trying to work with them on each of their emotions and what they were going through, but at the same time there was requirements to teach them all of this content so that they could take a standardized test at the end of the year.
Yeah. How do you think other teachers are feeling about this, especially after, COVID and them basically having to, work remotely and then come back and all these just
Yeah,
new procedures? How do you think that others are feeling, or if you have any friends
right. Yeah,
that
I
might
mean,
be going through this?
yeah, no, that's fine. I definitely have a lot of friends who are still teachers, and they love what they do. They love working with kids, and they love, watching their kids grow in academics, but I know how stressed teachers are just in
Mhm.
general. There are so many expectations, like I said, and you can have a good leader, in your building. Like I had a really amazing leader in our building. She was an incredible role model as a principal, and I felt very supported by her, but it's not just that, there is also expectations above her. And
Mhm.
then, when people such as them come in, I'm sorry, my doorbell just rang. Um, it it's even harder to try to do everything that you need to do in one sitting because it's like you can do so much in your classroom, and then there's the principal who has say over top of you, and then even over the principal, there's more people who have say over top of them. And it's like it just ends up not being necessarily like a healthy atmosphere to work in.
What do you think? I mean, I know that you've exited it and we'll talk about that, but if you were still there,
Mhm.
what kind of feedback would you, if it were open, like, hey, you're part of a discussion? Because this is important because I think a lot of parents have withdrawn because they're not on board now with what schools are, including myself. There's a lot that I know that needs to be done. But as a teacher, an educator,
Mhm.
what kind of feedback? Where can we get started? Where can we get started to do better?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing that I really strongly believe is no matter what you're doing, I think that you need to have passion behind it in some way. But uh, the way that our schools are structured at this point, a teacher is such a broad term. Like if you want to go be a teacher, that's great, but and you can specialize in age groups and I guess subjects and things like that depending on what you're teaching. But for me who was an elementary and special education teacher, it was a I was encapsulated. I taught all subjects. I taught, you know, the whole curriculum that I had to teach. And it was just I didn't have time to do what I wanted to do. So what I would think would make a better change is for there to be different areas where teachers are able to teach. So, for example, social and emotional learning has become like I want to say fad because, in my opinion, I don't think curriculums for social emotional learning work very well. If you are following a book, it to me should be more of just kind of like a flow and less of this is content we have to get to the each page each day and that type of
Right.
thing. So I feel like it would be a step in the right direction if schools were able to give teachers kind of more of a chance to figure out what exactly they care about teaching. Because there are some teachers who love, love, love watching their kids grow in math and love watching their kids grow in reading and love watching their kids go in writing. But in order to do any of those things, like you said, their emotions need to be taken care
Right.
of. Their thoughts and feelings need to be taken care of. And so you need to have teachers, in my opinion, who are leaders in that type of um, subject for kids to trust and go to where they know like, okay, I can go to math if I feel like I'm
Yeah.
okay after last night or last week or whatever happened at home.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so I think utilizing more passion is definitely, in the teaching world and pretty much any career path, but
I can
specifically,
totally relate to that because, I mean, my story, but, when COVID hit and the kids were, we did the remote learning and it was not for us. And we kind of had to revisit. And so we homeschooled our daughter. But our daughter really loved, being in that social environment and wanted to be back in like a pod setting, which we were fortunate enough to go to this new founded school where the owner and teacher is so passionate and like actually gave like a speech on how passionate she was and how she was a personal trainer at one point and then was like I can't teach adults, I can much better relate to children. And so you can see that, and it's like almost like we don't get the opportunity to interview the teacher or get to see if this is a right fit, and I what I also like is like having the opportunity for your child to communicate what they need.
hmm
Because there's a lot that I mean, hey, for me, if my kids wanted to be with me and wanted to homeschool with me, I'd be on board because I will just do whatever. But I was not an educator. I never really want, like you said, the passion really wasn't there to want to
yeah,
teach my children. So it's definitely something that I think has to be um kind of I don't know, like a two-way street. Because if you have the resistance on one side, what are we really doing here?
right,
So I
exactly,
like to talk about the subject because I have the homeschool community, which I love, and I have the other community where people are still in public school. We're all, I think, still trying to figure it out. And
yeah,
the great thing is that there's options there that are out there versus like, well, we just wake up and go to work or we wake up and go to school. Like it's so beautiful to have flexibility in
right,
how we learn.
right. Absolutely. And yeah, and I think that the choice and the way that kids learn and how teachers are able to provide that learning structure, I think is really important. It's just, of course there are like bigger factors here, right? Like teachers are not paid what they
Right.
should be paid or treated well and, things like that. And neither are the people even above them. It's just kind of this like pyramid of like
It's like the
power.
system that
And
just doesn't work anymore, really. I mean,
exactly,
it's not a
exactly.
fair system. It's
Right.
not. And I think that it's just we're seeing it now and it's becoming more apparent. So
Yeah.
you left this environment. What was it at one point where you're just that was it for you? Tell me a little bit about when you made the decision to kind of jump.
Yeah, so it was interesting. So actually my 3rd year of teaching in the Philly school that I was in, I was feeling all of that pressure and I didn't know why. Right. And I was like, well, I do have a new group of kids. Is it, that I miss my old kids or things like that? Of course, that was part of it. But I knew how passionate I was at the time about seeing it through and consistency. Consistency for me has always been such an important term. Like we learned about that in college. And that's, if I had to choose one word that really stuck with me throughout my education, and that is what it was for educators and for any type of caretaker at all, consistency is key. And
Mhm.
so the way that I translated that and unknowingly in school was that, if I was like, if I'm going to be consistent and these children that I'm working with, I was in Southwest Philadelphia, which is a troubling neighborhood. And, the kids come from different types of backgrounds and it's a tough area. So for me, they're coming from like the way that my brain works is they're coming from a household already that is extremely inconsistent. Their lives have been inconsistent since they were born, most of them. Um, and so the only consistent thing that they had, or some of them, was going to school every day. And so I was, the more I thought about it and the more I connected with my kids, the more I was like, well, how much more beneficial would it be for them to have a consistent teacher from, kindergarten to 4th grade and then maybe 5th to 8th grade and then transfer to or high school after that. Maybe
Mhm.
having the same teacher for, a gap or a period of time would help them with their consistency, feeling like they had somebody to come to that they could work with. I think that, my mindset was so trapped there for a while that when I got my 3rd year of teaching, I had new kids and I really loved those kids as well. No different than my first 2 years, but I knew I felt something different. I knew I was like, wow, I feel like I'm going backwards, back to the beginning of like, now we're starting over, teaching the same thing
Mhm.
over and over and over again. And I didn't feel like I was growing. I felt like I was just, watching my kids go and then starting back
So you
over.
felt like it's almost like you couldn't go back and keep repeating the grade. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I gotta go forward with them. Like I don't mind starting at first, but I have to now accelerate with them.
Yeah, like, let me grow with them
Yeah,
because, and that's only
totally.
yeah, I feel like that would have been more beneficial for the kids and for myself at that point, but so, I just remember feeling all that pressure, like, I really wanted to do more with the kids and didn't know what more I wanted to do, but it wasn't in that classroom, and so all of that year, I felt all of this pressure and was just like, "This isn't it. I'm not done. This isn't my end." I was at what, 23? Maybe, and I was just like, "This can't be forever, like, this is not my forever right here," and so, I think that just all of that pressure built up, and I just remember going in feeling kinda like a Groundhog Day type of situation.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and just, like, all the expectations that I had, like, writing standards on the board and writing, like, standards that, like, the kids didn't even understand, or, like,
Yeah.
writing just stuff that we had to have to, like, check the boxes. It was just like, this is so structured that
So how did you get the courage to leave to leave?
yeah. Yeah, I talked about it with a lot of people, like I do, typically. I talk about things with a lot of people. Um, and there was, somebody in our school who owned a small nonprofit, and I talked to him very frequently about my ideas because I consider myself like I just
You're a generator, right? Are you
yeah.
a
Well, manifesting generator. Yeah,
manifesting generator?
manifesting
That'll be
generator.
another topic we probably talk about.
Yeah, yeah. So I have like all these ideas and I'd like to talk about them with other people and see how like they can come to fruition or not. And so I talked to this guy who owned a nonprofit. His name was Ed. He was the sweetest old man in our school. He was an old lawyer and just like created this nonprofit to help schools in Philadelphia. And is like an amazing human. And so him and I talked probably once a week that year. And I was just like, here are my ideas, Ed. Like, I don't know what to do with them, but I want to create all these things. And I know that you can help me create these things. Like, what can I do? So by the end of the year, he offered me a job with his nonprofit. And he said, you know what? I've listened to you all year. You sound like you have a lot of ideas. I'd love to take you on with me if you're willing and you're really ready to be done teaching. Um, and so he created a position for me because of what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with parents. I wanted to bridge the gap between home and school. That was like my real mission at the time, was just like, there's something missing here. So he
Hmm.
created a position for me, and I worked with parents about mindfulness skills. We did a lot of breathwork skills. We did a lot of leadership skills from a book called The Leader in Me, or The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Um, and yeah, and it was a great, that was my kind of bridge over. So it was
Hmm.
like I wasn't fully out of teaching. I was just offered another opportunity and kind of went with it.
Yeah.
So I worked for the nonprofit for a year, and then COVID
But that's
hit.
cool though, because it sounds like these ideas, knowing where you are now, it's like it was like a perfect segue
Yeah,
to what you've been up to.
absolutely. Yeah, it is.
Is that when the mindfulness started coming in, or when did the mindfulness,
Yeah,
yoga, uh, inspiration come in?
yeah. So I took a course at Penn about mindfulness. I don't remember what year it was. Maybe like 2016 or 2017. But I took it. It was like mindfulness based stress relief is what I learned. And it was just something that I felt like very passionate about because it helped me grow. It helped me get really into meditation and started to get into yoga. And I started to get into yoga in college. But the mindfulness class really opened the door for me to learn more about what yoga means and what meditation means, and how there are, duality meanings to everything in that realm. And so I wanted to continue that. So through, you know, um, my mindfulness practice, I started working with parents, and then I ended up getting my yoga certification through that process somewhere in there. Don't remember the years, but they just all kind of went hand in hand, and everything felt like fluid, which was nice.
Mhm, mhm.
Looking back on it, it feels fluid.
How, after this, nonprofit position that you took, this educator role, what did you do next?
Yeah. Well, so then I went back to school. Then I went back to
Okay.
teaching. I went back to teaching and taught special ed for a year in Jersey. Uh,
Okay.
at this point, I moved out of Philly and moved to Jersey, right in Barrington, right close to you.
Oh, I
And
didn't know you were teaching in Jersey. I thought you were still in
yeah,
Philly.
yeah, no, I taught in Mount Holly for a year. Um, and again, loved what I did. My coworkers were amazing. My students were amazing, but I still felt like confined. I just remember all year being like, okay, how can I create something for me to fit here? Because I wanted that backbone of like, benefits,
Yeah,
and
the security,
yeah, I wanted the
the idea
security.
of mhm,
Exactly. That's like where I was at, is I needed that security. Or in my mind I did. So I was like, how can I try and work with my principals to like maybe create something, or bounce off of ideas of people and work more in social emotional learning, which is what I wanted to do or thought I wanted to do. I toyed with going back to school for my phys ed and health degree because I could kind of put in social emotional learning in there. And I also cared a lot about the body, but I still felt at that time that nothing was really fitting. So I tried school for another year, and then throughout that year, I was like, okay, I'm ready to move on. I need something else after this year is over. Like we will
like,
definitely
you
be.
finally at that point were like, "I'm over it. This is
Yeah,
it. This is the end of the chapter of being
yeah,
in the education, at least in the mainstream public arena."
yeah. So I actually at that point, my back in my third year of teaching, I found coaching, the coaching industry, and I knew that it stuck out to me somehow. And I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. But I put it on pause my third year of teaching. I was like, I'm not ready for it. So I brought it back open when I was teaching in Jersey, my last year of teaching. And I started my certification back in, that would have been like November of that year. So
And
November
this
20.
is the life coaching position.
Yeah, yeah. So then I started into life and health coaching. And I kind of have been like shifting a lot of things through my journey of coaching. So once school was out, I really honed in on, what I wanted to do with coaching and took a nanny job on the side just to pay for bills. Um, and through that journey, it's taken me a long time to get here, but I finally landed and feel really good about where I'm at now. And now I work with parents. I coach parents on inner child healing in order to strengthen their relationship to their child and understand their child and feel like they have a stronger connection there. So it feels really nice and
Yeah.
all that I was able to talk all of that out. It sounds like it fits really well.
It
So
does.
thank
It fits
you.
great. I mean, this is what's nice about telling your story. This is exactly what we do in hypnosis. It's like I got to build this story to understand this person. And when you start from like the beginning, it's like, oh yeah, that's me,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. And so I wanted to ask you a question on what I found when we met because, I have two children and I struggled with my daughter since she was like 9 months old, as you know, Erin. And so I came to you because I started seeing your posts about your parenting group, and then all of a sudden I started seeing inner child and I'm thinking, what is she doing here? Huh? It's adding some spirituality concepts in there. And so I found it quite interesting how amazing that was. So at what point you're helping parents, you're life coaching, where did that concept come to you of like working on your inner child?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I actually hired an inner child healing coach for myself years ago. At this point, when I was living in Barrington, I worked with her for a year. Um,
But how did you even know what that was?
yeah, so honestly, at that time, it was like a newer concept to me, but I have always been a person in therapy. So I've always gone through, things about my childhood, how I was raised, my relationship to other people, especially family, and people who are close to me. And so I've been familiar with the terms, but didn't really dive into anything aside from, my own journey in therapy. Um, but with coaching, I I I found a coach through she was a friend that I did yoga training with, and I saw
Mm.
what she was up to, and she was posting a lot of things that related to me. So I reached out to her one day and said, "Hey, what are you up to? I like your posts.
I want to know about this inner child stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I want to know what the heck is this." So we got on the phone and she told me what she's doing and was like, if you're interested in learning more about it, or it sounds like it could be for you, we could talk about what that looks like. And so I think it took like a week and I hired her as a coach because I was like, this is what I want. So
Awesome.
we went through a lot of like unprogramming, reprogramming, just a lot of different things, spiritually, but also just we had a lot of conversations and just like pieced together, how I am the way that I am now and how that relates to my childhood or how it relates to the way that I was raised. And I just remember it stuck with me so much because within that year, this just like transformation within me was happening and I didn't know. And I was so confused for the longest time. I just feel like I sat there with all these confusing thoughts, but what I was really doing was reprogramming myself and not realizing what I was doing. So I think a mix of things, the fact that I know that I love working with kids and how much I can connect with kids easily, but also how much I very much value and appreciate therapy, emotions, talking about things like that, and figuring out where you came from and why. All those things are part of my passions, and so when I kind of put all of those things together, it's really meaningful for me to want to work with parents who want to strengthen their relationship with their kids, right? Because like me, as when I think about my own inner child, I know that I wanted a strong bond with my parents, and I have one to an extent, and that's amazing, the bond that I do have with my parents. um but there are things that I feel, parents today can learn, um within acceptance and understanding and guidance, and um letting their kids just be kids and learn.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. I love that. I love how you had your own when we talk about awakenings. I don't know if you're familiar or can connect with an awakening or if there's something that happened to you. For me, it was more of like I was in a really I would say in like a low place, like the dark night of the soul. Those are some terms that are used. Awakening, and then like inner child is like doing the shadow work, right? We're going to a place where, and again, it's like dark night of the soul is like your shadow work.
Yeah.
Would you feel like any of that happened during this shift in your career, or that might have led you deeper into exploring this inner child wound or trauma?
Yeah. Well, so I don't know that there was necessarily one time in my life, but I think a collection really, like for one, when I found out what I really loved in teaching, which was working with the kids and their feelings. And then two, when I started therapy after college. That was a really empowering time for me to just kind of sit back and be like, whoa, what is happening around me and learn about that. So I think the two of those examples are just things that brought this all to my or started to bring this all to my attention. Um, and then when I went back to teaching in Jersey and I was so unhappy, that's when I hired Allie, my inner child healing coach. And so I think I was like seeking for some type of happiness. I was like, I know I'm unsatisfied. Like I feel
Mhm,
unfulfilled in life and I don't know why,
mhm,
and what I needed was to kind of take all those little pieces and put them together and be like, okay, well, these are all sporadically, spaced out through your life, but these are the reasons you're unsatisfied.
mhm. So it's like
And
someone putting those pieces together of like your awareness, like your
yeah,
conscious, I'm consciously aware, oh, that over there has been affecting me all this time. And it's like we just kind of put it under the rug, thinking it'll never come out again,
right,
realizing we need to expose that because that's what's going to make me heal anyway.
exactly. Yeah.
And so what is also great is you mentioned the parents. So not only do you have a daycare, which is great, and we'll tap more into that, but that the work that you're doing is not with the children in your other business, it's with the parents. So
Yeah.
you're getting the parents to tap into their inner child so that they can be more relatable to their children.
Right. Exactly. And the purpose there is just to bring the parents' awareness into, yeah, like how did you feel at this age or what happened
Hmm.
to you in this age? Or I have a lot of parents who will come to me and say, my I don't know 3-year old 4-year old 10-year old whatever is saying X Y and Z and it really bothers me, or they're not listening to me to get in the car or get ready or transition or do all these things. And I don't like who I become when I yell at them or when I get upset with them. And so we talk about triggers and we talk about how much they can really impact not only you but your relationship with your child. And that trigger comes from somewhere in your life, right? So
Hmm.
we kind of like think about that. We'll take a minimal or a small example, and just I'll ask them to think about where they were at that time when that happened to them. Um, and then what I like to, specifically tell parents to do is really the more you can relate to your kid, the more you can tell them, oh, mom understands this, or dad understands this, or I went through this when I was your age, or, give them some examples of, I hear you, I understand you, you're validated, you're safe. That's what the kid needs to hear. That's what kids need to hear now in order to feel, whole and feel like they can connect with their parents. And so if the parent wants to connect with their kid, they need to connect with their inner child first.
Absolutely. And sometimes depending on how you were raised, I mean, we didn't really know what was going on. I mean, unless someone shared with you, unless the parents decided to share. And that was great advice that you gave to me. Like just fill them in on how you're doing that day. They need to know too that sometimes mom is having a hard day, and just wanted to let you know that sometimes you can have a hard day, and so can dad and mom, and but we'll be okay, and just letting you know where we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's
Exactly.
great. I love that technique, and I can also attest to Erin. I mean, even though this is something too. I had questions like, well, how is it being able to be a coach to parents if you don't have children yourself? But I can also like tell you right away. I'm gonna let you speak on behalf of that. But as a testimonial, like having Erin come and work with me and with both my children, because at some point I started seeing behaviors occur with them together one on one. And she's like Johnny on the spot with like feedback. And I'm like, wow. Like, and it just shows the years of experience that you've had nannying and or being special education because, those circumstances happen in the classroom, but that's just the feedback that I have. So what can you say to a parent who says, "Well, how can you give me advice if you don't have children?"
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, no, I see, it's interesting because I say that myself too. Sometimes I'll have like imposter syndrome and be like, "Well, you don't have to," and it's I think the way I'm able to think on my feet that way is because they're not my kids, right?
Mhm.
I'm not connected with them as strongly or as in depth as you are. And so as much as I can connect to a child very quickly, it's easier for me to see from an outsider's point of view, you know, I can connect with this kid, I can hear what they're saying, I can understand them. Here's my feedback for you as the parent. And it's also a really good practice for me because I bring myself back to that stage. Like, I'll bring myself back to that 7-year-old Brielle and be like, "What
Because
did I?"
you did have a parent, like you were in that relationship.
Exactly, exactly. So it's like I'm bringing my inner child into this work at this point, and I'm saying, "Okay, in that time of need, what did I need? What would have helped me?" Okay, well, an explanation would have helped. If mom or dad are in an argument, "Hey, listen, we're just not getting along right now very well. We're just having a little bit of a moment. Everything's gonna be fine. We're gonna talk it out. Everything will be okay." Things, the very minimal explanation. You don't have to give details to your kids. You don't have to tell them everything about you. Don't have to put your feelings onto them. But any type of explanation, um, it helps a child understand because they're picking up on things that you don't even
Totally.
realize
Well,
they're
there's
picking.
times where me and Brian will be talking and we'll just be like passionate or like loud. And my son's like, "No yelling, no arguing." And we're like, "We're not yelling, buddy. We're just talking a little loud today." And he's like, "Oh, okay." But
Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting how they'll pick up on stuff like that right away and just easily just explaining what's going on
yeah,
can get us to shift and move,
yeah.
and make them feel like they're not responsible. Because I know that some kids will ultimately take that on as like they did something wrong.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and so I think that to answer your question, like the most important part to me is that I'm able to, not only with my studies, because I don't feel like I would be equipped enough with just studying. I think that it's important to experience anything. And so with my experience, um and leading myself back to what my inner child needed as a kid, that's how I'm able to connect with kids now and feel for kids now, and you know understand that they're innocent. They don't know right from wrong. They're learning, they're trying to test boundaries, they're trying to push their limits because they don't know any better. And you
And they gotta
know
learn when they are should know better too at some point, right?
Exactly, exactly, and they do have to learn that, but they need to learn it in a safe way, and
Right,
so
right.
that's where I come in with helping parents, teach their kids safety and teach their kids how to ask in safe ways or how to have safe conversations without feeling like they're pushed in a corner. I read something the other day that was saying, how important it is to not speak to your kid like you should know better. That phrase is really like thrown out there all around, and it's true because sure, did you have the conversation maybe with your kid last week or last month or whatever, but does that mean that they really internalize that forever? No, they're human. They
Yep,
don't remember things all the time, just like we don't remember things all the time. They don't
yeah.
know better. They made a mistake,
And
you
this
know
is where you go as a parent, be like, "Oh, yep, I screwed up."
exactly.
You
And
do,
like
and there's nothing about, I mean, and that's something that's part of parenting. I mean, you're gonna go through, I had some good friends say, like, you can't try to avoid the trauma in some way, like, you just have to just do your best, and
yes.
at the end of the day, if you can have a conversation with your child and say, "I could have done better." I think a lot of parents in the past or maybe still be doing it, have this ego too, where they don't want to admit that, "Hey, I could have done better." And it's like, that's a simple it's just a simple thing. It's like, "You know what? I just did the best with what I could, and I'm sorry, I could have handled that better."
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly right. Like there are a lot of parents who get down on themselves because they feel like they're not perfect, and there is no such thing as perfect. The only thing you can do is like you just said, Danielle, do your best, but owning up to things and having conversations with your kids and not putting on that front as I am perfect because I'm an adult is what
Mhm.
children need. They need to know that we're human too.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So you have that going, and I mean, I think that's grown pretty big, right? That
Mm.
part of, that one piece of what you're doing now, and then the other component is the daycare, right? So
Yeah,
you have this coaching business, and then you have the daycare business.
yeah.
You want to share a little bit about just what you're doing and what your goals are?
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah. So with the daycare, I had been nannying for a while, and like I said, it was just really to pay my bills. And so I moved when I moved back to Philly, I was like, maybe we'll just try doing it out of my house because I know people do that. So yeah, I started here, and it's been really great so far. I started in September. I didn't know what it was going to become, but I actually just opened my LLC so that it is a business now, and we're called Mini Philly Explorers.
Love
I
that.
Yeah, I went to LaSalle, so I wanted to use some sort of I loved my school. I loved what I learned from my school, so I wanted to use my we were the explorers. I wanted to use that somehow in the name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what would love it to be is just, right now it's out of my home. It's very small. I can have 8 kids a day. But I like how small and kind of like boutiquey it is in a sense. So it's a small setting, which I really do enjoy. And eventually, it'd be nice to expand into a brick and mortar here in Philly. Um, but the way that I see it is, my daycare is not going to be a typical daycare. It'll be very different, like more leaning towards the Montessori side of things, but just exploratory in general. So I want the kids to be able to express themselves in like any way that they want to express themselves, practice doing different types of activities that they wouldn't do at a regular, school or daycare. Be able to have some like physical play that's indoors for, when it's cold outside. But being able to like explore outside as well. Um, I just want different areas for, less of just like the typical reading and playing and more of
Right.
the atypical, like exploring things that not many other kids, especially
Sounds
in
amazing. Sounds
yeah.
really awesome. And in a way, now that you've kind of told me a little bit about what you're doing, Real School, which was once a pod, became a school because very similar. The woman had a passion. And I'd say it's like Montessori. They still doing curriculum, but like the younger kids that are in preschool and kindergarten, it seemed very much like that would be like your avenue. And or you could have done the other avenue too, but done it your way. Tackle all the emotional work. So it's like this is the sky's the limit. And so many people are creating these new schools, new founded schools, and we need people like you because
Yeah.
people are going to be like, I can't go back to that. And maybe at that point, you have more resources and more educators that you jive with because you can make the decision ultimately what you want to do.
Mhm.
And so I see some amazing things up your alley, girlfriend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
It's really exciting.
very exciting, very exciting. Was there anything else that you wanted to share or that's coming up?
Um, no, I think I got pretty much everything covered. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, how could people find you? If you wanna, we'll get some information from you so we can post it,
Yeah.
but just what were the best person if they wanted to learn more about your parenting, business or where to find you in Philly?
Yeah. So I can post both of my or I can send you both of my Facebook pages. I have a Facebook group for the peaceful parents, and then I have a Facebook group for my nanny daycare business as well. So I can send you both of those. Those are the best ways to keep up with what I'm doing. And
Yeah,
for the peaceful parents, I do a lot of like live sessions and information things on there.
yeah,
So to keep up with me for coaching. Yeah.
that's perfect, perfect. Now, if someone doesn't have Facebook, is there any other way to get a hold of you? Is that really typically your audience?
Yeah, it's typically Facebook, but I can also extend I haven't made it yet, but I will be making an email. Actually, I maybe did make it. Yeah, I do have it. Just kidding. My mindfulness
Okay.
email, I can send that to you
We'll
too.
put the mindfulness email too, so that way, if someone is just interested and wants to contact you, they can do that. So awesome.
Perfect.
Well, thank you, Erin. I really appreciate you joining me today. And thank you again for joining the Conscious Broadcast. Please, again, like and subscribe and reach out if you want to come on and join us. And you have a wonderful day. See ya.